The story of Saturday soup. My story, the story that introduces me to the Groves, was when I first came here, 7 years ago. And feeling quite lonely and isolated one miserable afternoon, I think it was coming up to around Christmas time, I decided that I would make a pot of Saturday soup. Now, Saturday soup in a pot, one person on their own could never eat a pot of Saturday soup. But the thinking was I could freeze it and put it in the freezer. My little fridge had a little freezer and I could have that for the rest of the week. So I made a big pot. I have a huge pot. We normally make it in a Dutch pot or a Dutchie, which is a big, heavy cast iron pot. And that is what my mother and my grandmother would have always used to make Saturday soup. I pulled this pot off the top of the cupboard and I started to fry up the onions and the garlic. And I thought, yeah, I'll open the door and see if the smells can permeate the fences and the gardens. And people will wonder, what on earth is she cooking in there? But nobody came outside and it just remained a miserable, cold day in the Groves. And the kitchen was cold as well. So I decided, okay, keep going. I took some oxtail out of my freezer because I had bought it specifically to make Saturday soup. And the oxtail or the pig's tail, that's what you use for Saturday soup. And the pig's tail is normally dyed red because it shows it's from the pig. And it has this funny paint on it. But this is what we ate in the Caribbean, and it went into the soup with the onions and the garlic. Now, overnight, I had soaked some kidney beans, and they soaked up in the pot. And that meant they'll be ready to boil out into the soup the next day. And I was ready. I was on track. I was going to make this wonderful soup and I was going to enjoy it that evening. And I was going to take some to both my neighbors because I'm sure when they smell this blowing through the garden, they will want to have some. Or at least I can say, this is what I'm going to give them. So I made this pot of soup, a huge pot of soup. And you know, with Saturday soup, it tastes even better on a Monday. You wouldn't eat it on a Sunday. So on a Monday, after it's permeated and marinated, all of that ingredients, it's special. We have a shop in the Groves called Amma's. And I walked down to Amma's and I bought some green banana and some yam. And I asked him if he had pumpkin, but he didn't have any pumpkin. But I can't make Saturday soup without pumpkin. So I deliberated a bit, and then I looked right in the back of the freezer and I found a little bag of pumpkin. Only a few pieces, but I threw it into the soup. This is going to be perfect. We had thyme. You know, thyme, well, Caribbean thyme isn't the same as the thyme you have grow here. It does a special flavor. And there was a tin of coconut milk. You have to have coconut milk in Saturday soup. Oh, this was like amazing. And I boiled it and boiled it and boiled it for several hours. And the peas boiled and everything the peas became soft and succulent and they took all the flavor from the soup. Then I rolled some dumplings. Dumplings are pure flour and water. And when I was young, I used to hate them. But, you know, this was flour and water made with love. And your mother would roll these dumplings into little spinners, they were called. And they had a little funny shape to them. You drop them into the soup as well. Anyway, my poor neighbors, they both had a bowl of Saturday soup each. I put it into plastic containers. I thought, well, it doesn't matter if I never get the containers back. Maybe I could just put them on the doors outside the house. But I thought, no, don't do that. I knocked on my neighbor to the right. and they weren't in. Or they pretended they weren't in, but they didn't open the door. And I felt a bit embarrassed now with these 2 bowls of soup. So I decided maybe I'll take this bowl back into the house, and I'll try the other neighbours. I will go back and I'll try the other neighbours. So I gave the neighbours on the right-hand side a knock. Quiet. Maybe they're not in. How embarrassing. Then eventually I saw the light go on and they walked towards the door, and they actually both opened the door. And I was like, I was so glad to see somebody. And I said, you know, I'm your neighbour. I've just moved in a couple of months ago, and I was making a satay soup. And traditionally, we like to give a bowl of satay soup to our neighbours and introduce ourselves. So my name's Althea, and yeah, I'm looking forward to living around here. Hopefully you'd like living around here along. And I just babbled on. But eventually I gave her the soup. It's still warm. It's satay soup. I don't know if you know what it is, but I hope you enjoy it. And their faces lit up, because apparently they had just been out Christmas shopping or whatever we were doing on a Saturday, and they were cold, and it was a cold day, and they took the bowl of satay soup, and I just remember the lighting up of their faces and the kind of genuine appreciation, and the fact that, yeah, if you were cold coming back from shopping, this is exactly what you would want. And hopefully they'll have enough for tomorrow or Monday as well. And it will taste even better. And then I shuffled back into my house. And the soup was never, ever mentioned again with my neighbours. I don't know if they ate it. I don't know if they enjoyed it. And I certainly didn't get my bowls back. But that was the reason I'd put it in a plastic bowl anyway. And that is a story of my first introduction to my neighbours in the Groves. And I lived in that house, 6-7 years? And it was a wonderful introduction. And it was just the grace with which they accepted my humble offerings. But I can't imagine what they must have thought when they found this oxtail. But it was the sweetest soup ever. And I promised to share the recipe.